There's a moment in every narcissist's life that Jordan Peterson describes as the moment of incapable reckoning, when all psychological exits simultaneously close, when all escape mechanisms fail, when there are no more narratives available to avoid fully confronting the reality of what they've done. It's like being trapped in a room that's gradually getting smaller, where each wall represents a truth they can no longer deny, until finally there's no room to hide. Peterson revealed what happens in the human mind when narcissists are completely cornered by the consequences of their own actions. And the answer will shock you about the ultimate nature of accountability and the extreme limits of human psychological resilience, if you want to understand what's really going on inside a narcissist's mind when the mask falls. Subscribe to the channel, like it, and comment below if you already suspected that one day this collapse would happen. The concept of inescapability for narcissists isn't about external punishment or cosmic justice. It's about an inevitable psychological convergence where all the avoidance strategies that have worked for decades simply stop working simultaneously. Peterson, drawing on a deep understanding of analytical psychology and decades of clinical observation, found that narcissists construct what he calls escape architecture, elaborate systems of denial, blame shifting, and reality rewriting designed specifically to avoid accountability. But here's the truly terrifying thing. These very escape systems eventually become the traps that trap them. Every lie told requires additional lies to sustain it. Every person manipulated becomes a potential witness. Every relationship destroyed leaves documented evidence. Over time, the very complexity of their escape systems makes them unsustainable. Imagine for a moment trying to maintain not just one false identity, but dozens of different versions of yourself for different people, different situations, and different contexts. Now imagine that all these versions begin to conflict with each other, creating contradictions that become impossible to explain or reconcile. But can you imagine the psychological terror of realizing that all your escape routes have been systematically blocked by the very strategies you used to build them? According to recent neuropsychological studies, when narcissists face complete inescapability, the brain enters a form of cognitive panic where the rational processing centers simply go into overdrive. It's like being in a maze, where every path you think leads to the exit is actually a wall you built years ago. And when you finally realize you're completely trapped, the psychological claustrophobia can be literally devastating. And then, all escape routes close simultaneously. Peterson describes this moment as one of the most intense psychological experiences a human being can face. It's not just being confronted with evidence of destructive behavior, it's realizing that there is no longer any psychologically viable way to avoid, deny, reinterpret, or escape the full reality of what you've done and who you are. The first stage of inescapability, which Peterson calls exit route elimination, occurs when narcissists realize that every escape strategy they successfully used in the past has been systematically neutralized. They can no longer blame others because the evidence is so clear. They can no longer deny because the documentation is irrefutable. They can no longer rewrite history because too many independent witnesses contradict their narratives. Peterson documents cases where narcissists at this stage become almost manic, trying to find new ways to escape accountability. They may try to create elaborate conspiracy theories, question the sanity of multiple people, or even attempt to manipulate physical evidence. But these desperate attempts only create more evidence of their manipulative patterns. But is true inescapability truly possible? Or is there always some psychological way to avoid full accountability? Peterson's research reveals something deeply disturbing. While physical or legal escape may be impossible, many narcissists find ways to maintain psychological escape. Even when faced with overwhelming evidence, they withdraw into dissociation, develop convenient mental illnesses, or create entirely alternate identities that are not responsible for the actions of the previous identity. It's as if the human mind has a nearly infinite capacity to avoid confronting unbearable truths about itself. Can you imagine your own mind literally fragmenting to avoid accepting responsibility for your actions? Peterson explains that some narcissists, when truly cornered, prefer psychological insanity to genuine accountability. It's an extreme form of escape that can be permanent. Let us know in the comments if you've ever witnessed someone seemingly freaking out when finally confronted with incontrovertible evidence of their destructive behavior. The second stage, which Peterson calls reality convergence, is when multiple independent sources of evidence begin to tell the same story about the narcissist's destructive patterns. It's not just an ex-spouse making accusations, it's children, colleagues, friends, medical records, legal documents, recordings, emails, all converging to form a consistent and irrefutable portrait. Peterson has found that narcissists at this stage often experience what he calls narrative collapse, where all the stories they've told about themselves simply can no longer be sustained against the weight of converging evidence. It's like trying to hold water in your hands. No matter how tightly you hold on, the truth keeps slipping through the cracks. But what happens when even dissociation and denial become untenable will shock you deeply. Peterson revealed that narcissists experiencing total inescapability often develop what he calls accountability terror, a fear so intense of accepting responsibility that it can manifest severe physical symptoms. They may develop panic attacks, chronic insomnia, digestive problems, or even neurological symptoms when forced to contemplate the possibility of taking full responsibility for their behavior patterns. It's as if the nervous system goes into high alert when faced with the prospect of genuine accountability. And here's the most terrifying part. According to Peterson, many narcissists would rather suffer total destruction of their relationships, careers, reputations, even physical health, than accept accountability. They will literally choose to lose everything rather than admit they were responsible for their own suffering and the suffering they caused others. Can you imagine being so psychologically invested in avoiding responsibility that you would choose total self-destruction rather than admit guilt? Peterson describes this as one of the most extreme forms of psychological resistance he has ever observed. But let me tell you something that will completely change your perspective on narcissistic inescapability. According to Peterson's research, there's a crucial difference between narcissists who face inescapability and self-destruct, and those who can use the experience as a catalyst for genuine change. The difference lies in the ability to tolerate what Peterson calls responsibility, vertigo, the disorienting and terrifying sensation of finally accepting that you were the architect of your own destruction and the destruction you caused others. It's a psychological experience so intense that it can cause literal physical disorientation. Peterson argues that this tolerance for responsibility vertigo cannot be taught or developed under pressure. It is a psychological capacity that either exists as a dormant resource or is simply unavailable. This means that when narcissists face true inescapability, the outcome is largely predetermined by psychological factors that existed long before the confrontation occurred. And then a question arises that few have the courage to explore. Is forcing someone into a state of total inescapability ethical, even when they have caused systematic harm to others? Peterson, with his deeply pragmatic yet humane perspective, suggests that sometimes it is, when the alternative is to allow them to continue causing harm indefinitely. But he also recognizes that creating true inescapability for narcissists can be psychologically devastating, not only for them, but for anyone involved in the process. It's emotionally brutal work that requires meticulously documenting years or decades of destructive behavior. But here's something that will completely upset you. Peterson revealed that even narcissists who experience complete inescapability, who can no longer deny or escape the reality of their actions, often find ways to use their trapped condition as a new source of emotional manipulation. They become the trapped narcissist who solicits sympathy for their impossible situation, using their inability to escape as evidence that they are being persecuted or treated unfairly. It's manipulation, disguised as victimhood, even using their own forced accountability as a performance to gain emotional control over others. Peterson describes this as entrapment narcissism, narcissism built around the theme of being trapped by one's own actions, but in a way that somehow still avoids genuine accountability while gaining attention and sympathy. Leave your thoughts below. Is it possible for a narcissist to experience true inescapability without turning it into yet another form of manipulation? Peterson's answer is profoundly pessimistic. He documents extremely rare cases where narcissists faced with total inescapability completely stop seeking sympathy, attention, or validation related to their situation. They silently accept the consequences of their actions and devote any remaining energy to minimizing future harm without expectation of recognition or forgiveness. But this kind of genuine acceptance of inescapability is so rare that Peterson estimates it occurs in less than 1% of narcissists facing full accountability. The vast majority find ways to use even their most desperate situation as fuel for continued emotional manipulation. And here's something no one tells you about narcissistic inescapability. It can be more traumatic for family and friends to witness than the original narcissistic behavior. Seeing someone you love completely cornered by their own actions, even when that situation is deserved and necessary, can create complex feelings of guilt, sadness, and conflict. Peterson often works not only with narcissists experiencing inescapability, but with their families who are trying to process the experience of watching someone be fully confronted with the reality of their destructive actions. What you'll discover now will transform your understanding of justice and psychological inevitability. Peterson revealed that true inescapability for narcissists isn't something that can be artificially created or engineered by others. It's a natural convergence of consequences that occurs when their own actions create a web so complex that escape becomes impossible. Attempts to force inescapability through coordinated intervention, planned confrontation, or systematic removal of support systems can backfire spectacularly. Instead of creating accountability, these tactics can create more resistance, more elaborate manipulation, or more dangerous behavior. This means that families and friends of narcissists often find themselves in an impossible position, wanting the inescapability that can lead to genuine change, but being unable to safely create or control when or how that will happen. Peterson also warns us about something deeply disturbing. Our contemporary society makes true inescapability extraordinarily difficult for narcissists to achieve. Social media provides endless opportunities to create new narratives. Political polarization allows people to find communities that will validate virtually any interpretation of events. Legal systems can be manipulated through financial resources and delay tactics. And here's the final truth that will reshape your understanding of personal responsibility and psychological justice. Narcissistic inescapability, when genuine, is not about external punishment or validation for its victims. It's about the natural psychological consequences of living in fundamental contradiction to reality for extended periods. The ultimate wisdom is not waiting for narcissists to become truly trapped by their actions, but understanding that your healing and protection do not depend on their eventual accountability. Their inescapability is their psychological journey, not yours. Real freedom from narcissistic abuse comes no from witnessing their inevitable entrapment by consequences, but from building your life in ways you're completely independent to whether they ever face genuine accountability. Because true inescapability teaches us that while psychological laws eventually assert themselves, our well-being cannot depend on waiting for those laws to manifest in others' lives. If you've made it this far, you're beginning to understand that justice in narcissistic abuse doesn't come from their eventual entrapment, but from your ability to escape their psychological traps and build a life where their accountability is irrelevant to your peace. In the next video, we'll explore how Jordan Peterson analyzes the moment of truth when narcissists face their destructive legacy, and why that confrontation can either liberate or completely destroy them. Subscribe and activate notifications, because this journey is revealing profound truths about human psychology that will forever change how you understand accountability, justice, and the natural consequences of our choices.